To learn more about earning college credits with study hall courses, go to gostudyhall.com or click the link in the description. Baseball cards, shoes, coins, books you're definitely going to read this year. We often have a bit of a proclivity for hoarding, because one thing about us humans, we love our stuff. And while collecting baseball cards brings you joy, it doesn't actually help you survive day to day. But throw it back a couple of centuries and instead of hoarding squishmallows, your ancestors were collecting resources like, food. And throughout human history, a lot of conflict came down to resources. You're thirsty and I have all the water. I'm hungry and you have all the food. You're a Swiftie and I have a signed copy of Folklore on vinyl. You get the idea. Some might say it's a tale as old as time, or at least as old as large-scale organized human societies go. But if we're just fighting over stuff, then isn't the solution as simple as just having more stuff? Well, with the Industrial Revolution taking place from the late 1700s through the 1800s, humans could suddenly, theoretically, make and export enough stuff for everyone. And yet, the 19th century was still filled to the brim with conflict. Hi, I'm Rob Fuller, and this is Study Hall, Modern World History. The Industrial Revolution was a time of massive global change as the rise of factories transformed the human economy. You can think of it kind of like a technological glow-up. The Industrial Revolution used coal and steam to power mass production, or the creation of huge quantities of a product by machinery. So if humanity's problem before was scarcity, or a lack of enough stuff to go around, then mass production should have solved that, right? But as the global economy expanded to this impressive new scale, so did the competition for the resources to make this stuff and control of supply and demand to sell it. So, even though there was more stuff, there was even more competition for control and access to it too, leading to large-scale global conflict over the resources needed to keep this new economic model running as smoothly as the factories that powered it. Resources like rubber, coal, and poop? That's right, we're talking about poop, people. During the Industrial Revolution, factories took center stage. But in order to keep these workers, working, you needed to keep them fed. So where did all of that food come from? The easy answer is farms. But there was a lot of pressure on farmers, particularly as more and more people moved away from agriculture and into cities to work in the aforementioned factories. Luckily, there are some shortcuts for successful farming. See, soil is filled with specific nutrients plants need, like phosphorus, potassium, and nitrogen. So, upping these important nutrients ups the amount of crops one farmer can grow. Enter birds. See, birds that eat a lot of fish produce a semi-solid substance called guano, with a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus, the very thing plants sap from the soil. When the birds, relieve themselves, they leave behind this precious guano. This guano worked even better than cow manure to fertilize crops, thanks to its specific balance of nutrients. After collection, this beloved bird crap was then shipped from islands in the Pacific to farms back in England, Germany, and the US to cover crops and enrich soil, meaning farmers could grow more food and feed more people. Of course, once people figured out that this special poop was worth its weight in gold, it was only a matter of time until the Dookie Derby started to heat up. It was certifiable guano mania, because in order to be number one, you needed a lot of number two. One of the countries to really profit from the new market was Peru, which exported about 13 million tons of the stuff between the 1840s and 1880s. But other countries weren't just going to sit idly by and miss a lucrative poopertunity. Anyway, the United States, in its scavenger hunt, passed the Guano Islands Act in 1856, claiming the right to seize any territory where they found guano, as long as it was vacant. But other countries got even more competitive over this precious poop. The War of the Pacific was a conflict between Chile, Bolivia, and Peru, and the prize? The Antofagasta, at the time a region of Bolivia along with the Atacama Desert, and a poop ton of guano. The coast contained a lot of guano that wound up on farms, while the desert contained large amounts of sodium nitrate, which could be used for fertilizer, but could also be used to make gunpowder. Those natural resources made the Antofagasta extremely valuable to whoever controlled it. There was no natural border like a river or mountain that separated Bolivia and Chile, and the fact that the region was extremely valuable meant that neither side wanted to agree to a border that would give the other country all of the wealth. So when they finally came to an agreement, it was connected to tariffs between countries, with each side trying to protect their wealth. Bolivia got the land, but Chile got the right to share profits from exports from that land. Then, in 1878, the Bolivian president Hilarión Daza broke that agreement, raising tariffs and threatening to take over the Chilean company that was mining sodium nitrate. It was a power grab, plain and simple. But 5 years earlier, in 1873, Bolivia had made a secret treaty with Peru that they would defend each other if war were to break out against a common enemy, say Chile. Oh, the drama. But Chile was powerful, and instead of Bolivia expanding their influence, they lost the Antofagasta and with it, their access to the coast. Chile gained control of the guano and sodium nitrate would become known as Chilean saltpeter. But wars weren't just fought over resources so industrialists could produce more goods, wars were also fought over markets so they could sell those goods. That's because the whole idea of mass production is that you make a lot of stuff, like a lot. But you're only one person. You can't use all that stuff yourself. So for this model of industrialization to work, this world can't just be a resource supplier for factories. It has to also be a market for the goods they're selling. And so suddenly, customers became the most important resource of all. Rather than fighting tooth and nail over food, water, silver, gold, trade routes, insert your favorite resource here, now human beings were fighting over other human beings. Not to consume, take it easy Hannibal Lecter, but to sell to. Conflict over access to people to buy up your goods is just what happened in China in 1839. Although the Qing dynasty had greatly expanded and had close trading relationships with its neighbors like Japan, its European trade was limited to just one city. They called the city Guangzhou, which was then mistranslated into English as Canton. The Qing dynasty tried to enforce tight regulations on trade in Guangzhou to limit what was exchanged and what ideas were spread. They had a pretty good reason for this, since by now Europe had a well-earned reputation in Asia for taking things that weren't theirs. Like when Spain took over the Philippines, or when the Netherlands took over Indonesia, or when the Portuguese had taken over the Chinese city of Macau in 1557. Which, don't worry, they gave back, only in 1999? In fact, when King George III sent diplomats to negotiate for better relations, the Qing emperor rejected them, insulted the British Empire, and told King George in a letter, and this is a quote, "Do not say that you were not warned in due time. Tremblingly obey." But even with the restrictions, Chinese trade with Great Britain was thriving. The British imported up to 32 million pounds of tea some years, as well as porcelain, silk, and other luxury goods. Things were pretty good. Well, good for China. Because the problem was that Chinese goods were too popular. China wasn't buying a lot of British goods, which meant that the British had to pay with gold and silver rather than through trade of their own products to get the poop load of tea that they wanted. Sorry, that is the last of the poop jokes, I swear. And so the problem escalated when China banned the import and sale of opium. Now, opium has a complicated history. It was used as medicine, but also as a way to get high, and whether as a medicine or as a recreational drug, that stuff was both dangerous and addictive. And in China, millions of people were smoking opium. We're talking about an opium epidemic. The damage that opium did led China to ban it, and more than once. But each time the opium trade would continue illegally. Finally, in the 1820s, they tried again, prohibiting the import of the drug. The thing was, opium was how the British merchants made most of their profits and how the British got back some of the gold and silver they spent on tea and porcelain. Plus, much of the opium came from British-controlled territory in India and helped to pay for the cost of colonizing that territory. They even suppressed the production of cotton, another cash crop, to plant more opium poppies. So British merchants decided to just ignore the law and started smuggling opium in, bribing officials along the way in order to maintain that access to the opium consumers. But the Qing emperor wasn't going to fold this time. Instead, he sent a highly respected official named Lin Zishu to stop the opium trade by seizing British merchant ships. His efforts undermined the vast majority of smuggling, costing Great Britain a lot of money. But rather than accept their losses, the British used the seizures as an excuse to start a war, fighting for access to a crucial resource for Great Britain, the huge market for highly addictive drugs. They invaded China and quickly defeated the mighty Qing dynasty. And the victorious British weren't going to let an opportunity for trade and subjugation pass them by. So they drafted the Treaty of Nanjing. The Treaty of Nanjing gave Great Britain everything they wanted, or at least control over secure economic markets. China was forced to open 5 ports to trade so that British merchants had even more access to Chinese consumers. Not only that, China was also forced to give the city of Hong Kong to the British forever, basically. Oh, and now opium was legal again. So what did China get? Well, the distinctive privilege of paying 20 million silver dollars to the British. That's right, the Chinese had to pay the British for beating them up. The opium market is just one example of this new kind of resource that emerged during the Industrial Revolution. Suddenly, things like control of supply and demand and access to consumer markets were just as crucial to a nation as food and fresh water. And its larger scale led to even larger violence. The advances of industrialization meant more. More food, more products, more factory jobs, more trade. Yet, instead of satisfying human needs, industrialization created a new hunger on an even larger scale. A demand for more raw materials and an equal demand for more customers. From squabbling over a lifetime supply of guano to control of the international drug trade. This large-scale greed led to global clashes over resources. And even today, when it comes to things like the crude oil that fuels our cars or the coltan that powers our smartphones, this worldwide competition for resources is far from over. If you're enjoying Study Hall Modern World History and are interested in taking online courses and earning college credit, go to gostudyhall.com or click on this button to learn more. Thanks for watching. See you next time.